Stay up to date on the latest political news this election season for less. Visit inforum.news/port and get 3 months of unlimited access to our news network for only 99 cents a month. Subscribe now at inforum.news/port. Welcome to Plain Talk. And so far on the show, we have done a debate between the candidates in every statewide race, but two. Coming up later in the month, we're going to have a debate in the United States Senate race between Republican incumbent John Hoven, Democratic-NPL challenger Katrina Christensen, and independent challenger Rick Becker. But today, we're going to bring you two candidates who are running for a seat on North Dakota's Public Service Commission. Now, normally the Public Service Commission serves 6-year terms, and so every other cycle, every cycle, one of the commissioners is on the ballot. But this year, because of an appointment, Brian Crocious left the Public Service Commission. He is now our tax commissioner. So we had an appointment to the Public Service Commission. That's Republican Sheri Haugen-Hoffart. She's on the line with us. She was appointed to the commission, and that appointment has to be confirmed on the statewide ballot. Julie Fedorchak is the other commissioner who's up running. She's up running for re-election to her normal 6-year term. We had an interview with her. Was it 2 months ago now, Chad? Was that August?
It was a long time ago. I forgot everything I learned about the PSC between the two debates.
Yeah, well, we had a lengthy conversation about weights and measures during that debate. That was a lot more interesting than I think anybody expected. But now challenging Sheri for the Public Service Commission is Trygve Hammer. He is the Democratic-NPL candidate. Trygve, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
We're glad to have you both on. And, my first question out of the gate, I think for both candidates is, the basic one. Why do you want to serve on the Public Service Commission? What attracted you to this office? And let's go to Sheri first. What attracted you to the Public Service Commission? Why did you want to be in this position?
Well, first of all, I want to say good morning to everyone, and thank you for the flexibility on rescheduling. I know we've rescheduled this a couple times due to schedule, so I want to thank you. And thank you, Mr. Hammer, for participating. It's good to meet you and see you, even though it's on video. So why am I the best candidate for this? For the past 10 years, I have been extensively preparing myself for being a public service commissioner. I was elected to Capital Electric Board, and then the Capital Electric Board elected me to Central Power. I learned about generation, transmission to distribution to being the end user, the member. And within that time period, I became very familiar with the rate design, financial statements, RTOs such as SPP and MISO, under determining the right balance for regulation, keeping costs low, reliability high, and making sure the infrastructure investments are reasonable and just. I was very pleased with Governor Burgum's confidence in my knowledge, skills, and leadership, and when he appointed me to the PSC. And that confidence has been followed through these past 8 months by me hitting the ground running and demonstrating my knowledge, skills, and my leadership for the past 8 months as a public service commissioner. Those 9 years definitely prepared me for this. I was a very invested board member, very engaged, and it became clear that I had a passion for this job. One final note, as I was in this position in June, my fellow commissioners in 14 states elected me already to serve on the executive team on the Midwest Regulatory Board. And I'm also serving on the Upper Plains Transmission Institute Advisory Council, which is strongly associated with NDSU. So in a recap, I have the knowledge, skills, and abilities. I prepared myself for the 9 years to do this job. And in the past 8 months, I believe I have demonstrated I have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do this job.
Trygve, same question to you. Why the PSC?
Well, first of all, I ran because the party needed someone to run. And when I'm asked to step up, that's what I do. That's who I've been. I kind of took issue with in forum when they did their endorsement, and they said it was based on experience. And as you heard, Sheri has experience in the field here. I'm not saying she's not experienced, but they discounted all of the experience that I do have. The forum basically said, he was a prior Marine and he lost an election getting only 12% in 2020. They didn't compare that to Julie's race in 2020, Sheri's race in 2020, because she didn't have one. Not her fault, but it's kind of weird to me that the forum pointed that out. I do have a lot of boots on the ground experience and a ton of leadership experience. I was a Marine attaché in the U.S. Embassy. I wrote speeches for an ambassador and admirals there. The forum might not call that experience, but I do. Spent half of last year out on the oil rigs. So, the forum thinks guys who've been out doing that, boots on the ground, work at the actual wellhead, don't have experience. I taught 7 to 12 science here in Gradville when I came back. I taught leadership, strategy, and tactics at the U.S. Naval Academy when I went back there. I'm an airline pilot, a helicopter pilot. I was a defense contractor writing manpower and training plans for the Marine Corps acquisitions of different systems. I've been a forward air controller. My last command in the Marine Corps was the MAGTF staff training program. And what we did is we took general level staffs and we got them together, exercised them, trained them, got them ready to execute the mission in Afghanistan. Part of being on the PSC is running a staff. Another part of being on a PSC is managing portfolios. You need someone there who can learn that stuff fast. I have been through U.S. Naval Academy where I had to memorize volumes of information as a plebe to be able to regurgitate it, where everything you learned was via the fire hose method. Same thing with Navy flight school. You're drinking from the fire hose every day, and as soon as you get done with one flight, you're prepping for a flight the next. Inform might not think that's experience, but I think it is, and I think it's transferable because when I left the fleet, I flown helicopters. Then I was a forward air controller with 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines. I came back from that to the Naval Academy and taught. So I spent 4 years out of the cockpit, didn't touch the controls on anything. I arrived back in Hawaii for another tour flying helicopters. And I know my life sounds really rough right now, 2 tours flying helicopters in Hawaii. But I was a better pilot. I was better on the sticks from day one when I got back after 4 years of not touching it, just because I had gathered experience, I had gathered maturity. And I continue to learn. I would love to be in the classroom right now as well, but the railroad pays a lot better. Last year, the oil field paid a lot better. I care about PSC issues, though I'm finding being a teacher is helpful when you're running for this position because you have to teach people what the PSC does. A lot of times they don't even know that it's a statewide office. They're like, oh, is that the county race or local? No, it's statewide. And you teach them what the commission does. You teach them how the commission is built. And I've enjoyed doing that. I've enjoyed hearing about the issues, and I've found that people can change my mind on issues as we talk out there. And the other thing that it kind of made me want to get in this year is I do feel like we're starting to see, we've got some inbreeding going on in the state government. We've got some, a lot of Republican relatives working together. And I'm when I say relatives, I'm talking figuratively here. And that it's starting to show. The emails that disappeared from the former attorney generals, and all of a sudden that's not a big deal. Just auf Wiedersehen emails. We're not concerned about that. We have a guy running, same guy, Drew Wrigley, doesn't seem to care about that, and he also apparently sent a text trying to overturn the 2020 election, and it just doesn't seem like a big deal. And the press in North Dakota seems mostly on board with all of that stuff. And I just feel like there's a bit of an ethical sickness. A little bit of that inbreeding is showing now.
Trygve, you mentioned that not a lot of North Dakotans know about what the PSC does. And frankly, I would describe myself as one of those North Dakotans who doesn't really understand all the stuff that the PSC does. If you're talking to an individual voter and they say, why should I care about the PSC? Why should I care about the PSC? And then Sheri, the question to you after Trygve's done.
Okay.
Well, the PSC is looking out for your interests. It's looking out for your interests when someone wants to bring a pipeline across your land. It's looking out for your interests when an investor-owned utility, and if you live in any kind of decent-sized town in North Dakota, which that's kind of hard to find decent-sized town in North Dakota, but most towns in North Dakota, my town, Belva, Minot, they're served by investor-owned utilities by a rural electric cooperative. So when they want to increase their rates, that's up to the PSC. And right now, MDU is looking for a rate increase, Otter Tail is looking for a rate increase, and I think there's one other, Excel's looking for a rate increase from the Public Service Commission. Public Service Commission has a piece of railroad safety, and I don't know if any of you have heard or about up in Harvey recently. We had a grain truck, well, it was an empty truck actually, got hit by one of our trains. It is an issue. It took out an engine, and another train hit a similar vehicle in Minnesota, took out another engine. That's a big logistic hit. We count on the railroads, and railroad safety is paramount to keeping that operating smoothly. And then the PSC has their fingers in so many things that you don't really see. They regulate a lot that you use but don't think about. You know, the scales in your grocery store, the meters on your gas pumps, making sure all of those are accurate. So people just don't tend to not realize how much the PSC is involved in their lives. And in fact, I was at a lutefisk dinner in Belva last Sunday, and a person mentioned to me that, oh yeah, the PSC has a piece in rail safety, don't they? And I'm like, yeah, you know more about the PSC than most of the people I've encountered on the campaign trail.
Sheri?
Well, I'm going to go back to your question is why is the PSC so important, correct? Just to clarify. Well, it's so important because everything I bet you've done this morning, we have touched your lives in some ways, from the moment you turned your lights on to the warm shower to, I mean, here we are. Our technology is based on having reliable electricity to have this interview. Mr. Hammer did a lot of things. We touch a lot of your lives, from the electricity to weights and measures, all those commercials, the inspections on the gas pumps to make sure that you as a consumer, what you are purchasing is what you're appropriately paying for. Railroad safety, call before you dig. That's very important. I mean, we can prevent a lot of injury there. How we educate, one of the important things is when we do have a hearing, a siting hearing, we go out to the community in which it's served. We want to hear from the public on what is your concerns about this application that's being brought forth in your community. That's why we as the PSC go out into the communities and hold public hearings for there. When I've been across this whole state campaigning, part of it is not only them getting to know me, but it is educating people on the PSC. Is there any intent on their ignorance? No. Is it sometimes have we just assumed that reliability, that every time we go to the light switch, it's going to come on? Well, now we're hearing on a national level on grid reliability, rolling blackouts, brownouts, and all that. You know, people are being more invested. The cost of electricity, the natural gas costs going up. People are being more aware on how it impacts them. So that's good to know, but we as a PSC also have the educational component to go out there and educate our taxpayers on what the PSC does.
Sheri, I wanted to ask you something. Trygve brought up, I think he called it inbreeding in Republicans, and I won't pursue that particular metaphor, but I think he's speaking to something that maybe a lot of North Dakotans or some North Dakotans perceive, is that we have so many Republicans in elected office. You know, a Republican hasn't won on the statewide ballot in a decade. All right, Heidi Heitkamp was the last. I shouldn't say maybe some Democrats will win this year, but 2012 was the last time a Democrat won on the statewide ballot. how do you deal with, or how would you respond to people saying, listen, you're another Republican. We already have so many Republicans in office. Republicans are growing too comfortable with power. How would you respond to somebody saying that as a Republican on the statewide ballot? And Trygve, I'll ask you a different version of this question. Obviously, you can't speak for Republicans, but Sheri, as a Republican, how would you answer that question?
Well, I'm going to answer it from my perspective. I got in this race. I reached out to Governor Burgum when this vacancy became open because I believed I had the knowledge, skills, and ability and the passion to do this job. And I want somebody holding office that really has the desire to be in it and to serve the citizens of North Dakota. Everyone has a right to run. And if you have that interest and passion, run, go for it. And, I've been blessed with a lot of support, but I'm going to say my support has been bipartisan because they believe in me. So I'm just, that would be my answer. If you want to do it, you have the interest, we'll sit and talk about what it means to be a public service, be it a legislator. It's not all glamour. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly and what it means. But you have to determine if you have that inner fire in your belly and drive to do it. And I do. So that's why I ran.
Trygve, the other side of that question is there, obviously the reason why Republicans are so successful on the statewide ballot is because of voters. Voters are casting their ballots for those Republican candidates, and obviously how each voter determines how they're going to vote is up to them, but a lot of them are casting their ballots against Democrats. I know you referenced this in, and by the way, I should point out, as a employee of Forum Communications, I mentioned your background pretty extensively when I wrote about you at the convention. But I remember because it stuck with me. Your speech at the convention where you received the Dem-NPL endorsement. You talked a lot about being a sort of different type of Democrat. So speak to that a little bit. I mean, obviously, again, Republicans are winning because voters are voting for them. Why aren't voters voting for Democrats, and how do Democrats turn that around?
Well, at the convention, you may have noticed I believe the words I used was we needed to talk to those people who have just been reflexively voting Republican. And a criticism that we had received was that, every time we go up there, the Democrats have a whole different slate of statewide candidates. And at the governor's dinner, I gave a different speech, and I said, I promise if I don't win this time, I will be around the next time to run on the Dem-NPL ticket. Now, of course, the one guy who did do that for us this year was Mark Haugen, and you saw what happened to him, and that kind of made me have some doubts, made me feel like maybe I'd let these people find their own someone to run for them. But I'm running because I see myself as a leader, and I see things that I think are broken. And I've talked to a lot of people who are probably to the right of you, Rob, who've actually reached out to me and said, I am tired of that technocrat rhino king Burgum running everything in state government. And I'm like, I'm with you, brother. But, thank you for giving me your vote. There are some things I think are broken on both sides here, but I really do think, you can say that it was a contentious Republican convention, but it was really more of a dichotomous Republican convention. It didn't represent a wide range of views. It represented a black and white kind of difference, family fight going on there. But we as Democrats just really need to get out and talk to people. I'm finding there's a lot more people who talk about the Democrats and the Republicans than who talk about themselves as Republican or Democrat. And a lot of people say, I don't vote for the party, I vote for the person. But we have to keep people coming back, and we have to keep offering good quality candidates. I think, I've become great friends with Katrina. She's really smart. I am going to vote for her this year. I think she's a good candidate. And she also said that she would be around next time to run for something if she fails in her bid for the Senate this year. been out there with Jeffrey Powell. I think he's an excellent candidate for the Secretary of State. I think he'd do a good job there. I think he would take election integrity, security, and modernizing the office very seriously, and would be very good at running that. He's kind of been the guy who's run things when we have our meetings. He's got a lot of energy, and I really respect him a lot. So we need to keep people like Katrina, like Jeffrey, I'd like to say like me, coming back and running again. And I think we can get in there. And once a Democrat does get in there, they'll probably end up getting reelected. There is a huge advantage to incumbency. We see that across the board.
My question is, go ahead, Trygve, do you have more?
So the last public service commissioner, well, we've had one Democratic public service commissioner from North Dakota, and he was appointed, I believe, at first, and then he won re-election over and over. So, that is a nice advantage. And the other thing we're seeing is because the way the party has been, or the way the party has been viewed, it's really hard to fundraise because, if you're going to put your money down and bet on someone, you want to bet on someone who has the advantage, who's shown the ability to win or whose party is winning.
Sheri, I want to sort of speaking about the power of incumbency. The PSC really has been a bit of a revolving door in terms of people not finishing their terms and moving on to other things, and then new people getting appointed. As a matter of fact, I think all three current members of the PSC got their start with an appointment.
No, Randy Crispin did
Randy did not. Okay, so two of the three did not. Yep. So do you see an issue with that? Why do you think this is happening so much with the PSC? I mean, they're 6-year terms, so they're a little bit different. They're longer commitments, but it does sort of feel like people get in there. If it's Kevin Kramer, if it's Brian Kalk, if it's Brian Crocius, that they're resigning mid-term. Why do you think that's happening? Are you committed to fulfill the rest of this term if elected?
Well, there's two questions there.
Yep.
I'll do the first one. I would say if an opportunity comes along for someone that they are seen as a public service commissioner with a lot of knowledge and skills, and those skills take them on to something bigger, like it did with Tony Clark, why wouldn't they consider it? So I applaud that North Dakota public service commissioners are being recognized and recruited for bigger positions like what happened to Tony Clark. For me, when I sat down and figured out this term, 4 years and running again, my first impression was, holy smokes, then I can retire. Where did time go? So as I said to Governor Burgum, and I'm saying to all of you, when I accepted his appointment, I informed him that I would announce my candidacy to fulfill the 4 years that are left in this. And unless something unforeseen happens to me, I plan on fulfilling out this 4-year term and most likely announcing my candidacy then for the next term to fulfill a 6-year term.
Trygve, what do you think about sort of and maybe it's a perception more than reality, but it does seem like PSC seems to be more of a jumping off point for other things than to stick around. I mean, other than you mentioned the former Democrat PSC commissioner, who I think was there for like 45 years, and then Leo Reinbold as well. So it seems like that's changed a little bit. But what do you think about that? And are you committed to fulfilling the term and not jumping onto other things if you win?
If I had won in 2020, I'd be just, the state legislature would be my thing right now, and there's a lot of things I think the state legislature could do different. So yeah, I don't see myself as ever being Congressman or Senator Hammer or anything like that. If I get in the PSC, I would plan to stick around. I think it's important to have a little bit of continuity, and And, I think it's important to have a public service commission or anyone in statewide office, especially when you have more than one person on that job and they're a commission that works together. Is, you don't want everybody asking, what would Doug Burgum want? You need some variety in there. You need a little bit of diversity, and you come up with better decisions that way.
I want to ask a question about one of the things we talked a lot about. A lot of what the PSC kind of does flies under the radar, and it's kind of like a referee in a game. Like, you don't notice them until they blow a call. I feel like it's that. Like, if the lights don't come on anymore, people might start talking about the PSC more. But one area that we did a lot is pipelines. Obviously, we have the Dakota Access Pipeline. The Summit Carbon Pipeline is proving, so far to be a little bit controversial, is driving a lot of public debate. Is there anything about that? I remember specifically during the Dakota Access Pipeline protests and how ugly all that got. One claim that was made is that the Public Service Commission didn't sufficiently do public outreach. And maybe, Sheri, I'll start with you on that. Do you feel like there's anything that the Public Service Commission could do better when it comes to doing its work, particularly in areas like pipelines that become very contentious? Do you see the need for improvements, or is the status quo okay for how the Public Service Commission goes about its business?
Well, the first thing I want to say is, going back to a comment that I made, is that when we do get an application, we do bring public hearings out to the community, and we encourage the public to get engaged and come to them and speak. We do that, and that onus is on them once we're in that area to come out there and do that. As far as pipeline safety, I want to give a plug to our team that we just went through a federal review this summer on our pipeline safety program, and we scored a 99 out of 100 on our pipeline safety program. So our inspectors are out there in the communities, doing the evaluation, reviewing programs, working with companies. So that is, I'm going to say that's a big kudos to us and our staff on what we're doing there. Communication always gets saying, what could we do more? What can we do more? We do evaluate that. But I want to tell you, the most important thing that was, when there is an application, a siting application for a pipeline, we go out to those communities and we do that for public input. So, to the convenience for them. So I think we are doing a lot. But do we always evaluate if there's something we can do better? Yes, I think every company, but we here at the Public Service Commission, we do that. We evaluate, what can we do better?
Trygve, same question to you. What could the PSC be doing better?
Well, let me go onto this pipeline issue thing, because that really is the thing that I've been hearing the most about. And I'm not so sure that it's the PSC that needs to fix this as much as it is the state legislature that needs to fix how we qualify companies or projects to use eminent domain. If you go down to where the Summit Carbon Capture Pipeline is coming through North Dakota, you run into a lot of people who are very passionate and, for the most part, did not want the pipeline not on their land, not near their land. And also the company, if they'd send land agents out to secure these leases, and the land agents would be dishonest with landowners. And if they weren't dishonest and didn't push hard enough to get the leases from these landowners, they would find different land agents who would be willing to be dishonest, who would be willing to threaten with eminent domain. And in fact, I believe Summit Carbon Solutions actually sent letters threatening to use eminent domain down in South Dakota. So I think the Public Service Commission should not permit that pipeline as a public utility able to use eminent domain to take land in order to complete that project. And I think the state legislature needs to go in and fix that. It was a Supreme Court decision by the liberal side of the Supreme Court that actually kind of opened up this public use, or public benefit versus public use. And at that time, I forget when this was, it was late 80s, early 90s, I believe.
Early 90s, it was the Kelo decision at the KELO decision at the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yep, exactly it. And there was a lot of conservative backlash, and rightly so. I feel like that was a bad decision. But then what happened was, state legislatures, especially Republican state legislatures across the country, wrote up rules to stop that in their state, except they made all these carve-outs for their favorite industries. And now our state legislature, they need to forget about, CRT and all the other goofy stuff they want to work on, and actually work on this eminent domain issue and fixing that in the state.
I think
particularly with pipelines.
I think our current eminent domain law that's in the state constitution was the result of a ballot measure pushed by Heidi Heitkamp, I think, back in the day. Maybe I'm misremembering that. Sheri, can you speak a little bit to? I'm sorry, Chad will have a question, but can you speak a little bit to the PSC's role in that eminent domain? So Trygve said the PSC should not certify the Summit pipeline. Can you speak to that?
Well, first of all, we do have the application for Summit, so I can't talk specifically about the Carbon Summit application because we do have it. But we do not have jurisdiction over eminent domain. Okay, we just do the citing. So the eminent domain is between the company and the landowner. And so we don't have any jurisdiction over eminent domain.
So I want to talk about something else that often gets more publicity than most things before the PSC, and that's rate increases for electricity rates. So I want to talk a little bit about process and ask you both, what are the things that you weigh when a company comes before the PSC, or will weigh when a company comes before the PSC asking for a rate increase? Because obviously rate increases affect all of us, and mostly people on fixed incomes. Trygve, I'm going to start with you here. What do you think should be taken into consideration when determining if a company should get a rate increase or not?
Well, first of all, you need to look at what the company has already been making, how healthy the company is, what they're looking to invest in infrastructure. Last year, 2021, MDU made $51.9 million in net profit on their electric business alone. So they are a pretty healthy company. I'm not saying that they shouldn't operate at a loss, that's for sure. We need to be fair to the company. We need to be fair to the people of North Dakota. And we especially have to look out for those people who are living on fixed incomes, and really look especially hard when we're thinking about changing residential rates, because that is where you're going to impact people who are on those fixed incomes, people who sometimes are barely making the rent or barely able to pay the power bill to begin with. And we do have programs to help folks like that, but we need to take all of that into consideration.
Sheri?
Well, I can't add anything really different. I know the process that we go through here when we get a rate case. And one of the things that we really do is when we hire a consulting, when we get in that application fee, a consultant and the staff to really what we call tear apart the application, as in what are some of the factors that the company is saying that we want to add this because this cost is creating an increase in our cost of service, and say, no, you can't add that into it. You can't add that into it. So we really take the time with the consultant and our advocacy staff and our staff to really dig through hard on what is a reasonable rate of return versus what does it cost to do business and keep them, and that reliability, keep those lights on. So these cases are very complex. We really dig into them, tear them apart. And it's to find that balance. It's really to find that balance and start that negotiation on what is a reasonable rate of return and that balance on that reliability on keeping those lights on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go. And that's why some of these rate cases take a lot of time, because it's a lot of going back and forth. Getting the consultants, getting the report in, reading the testimony from the company, having this consultant do a testimony, rebuttal testimony. So that's why some of these rate cases take some time, maybe up to a year to determine.
What my next question, we've talked around, I think, this issue a couple times, or we've mentioned it, I think, a couple of times, but grid reliability. And I understand, first of all, people need to understand this is a complex issue that the PSC doesn't control itself. There's, FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Organization. We have power grids. We have obviously other states, right? Our power doesn't just stop at our borders. The grids that serve us cross state lines. But it's become more of a concern. We're seeing in California where, they're having, I'm forgetting the euphemism they're using, but it's something where they're asking people not to plug in their electric cars at certain times of the day. Grid reliability is an issue there. Frankly, grid reliability has been an issue in North Dakota. We saw it, the problem originated in Texas, but the Southwest Power Pool that serves Texas, parts of Texas, also serves parts of North Dakota. And there were North Dakotans who had to go through blackouts because of what was happening in Texas. So I guess, Sheri, we'll start with you and then we'll go to Trygve. How does the PSC address resiliency from the state level? I mean, first of all, do you perceive that as a problem, and how does the PSC address it?
Well, we do perceive it as a problem. And I'm going to go back to when I was serving on the board. Excuse me. When that event happened, I was sitting in a boardroom and we had no control.
Be clear, our listeners might not know what you mean by the board. Which board?
Capital Electric.
Gotcha.
Excuse me. And sitting, actually, I was up at Central Power in Minot on that board when that event occurred, and we had no control on load being shed. And that really sparked an interest for me because I'm like, how do we not have local control on our end users? So getting back to grid reliability, if nobody listened to your interview with Commissioner for Julie Fedorchak, she talked extensively, you guys talked extensively about grid reliability and what it means. But I will address that in saying we have Julie who's serving on MISO, and we have Randy who is serving on SPP. And that's what's very important for us, is to have that local voice on regional and national boards to talk about what it means to have grid reliability. So, and also me serving on Mark as also having on the executive team to talk about grid reliability on our 14 state consortium. So finding that balance, I mean, as we're bringing in more renewables, what does that mean to our base load on our coal and all that? That is more dependable. Are we retiring coal plants too soon with these renewables coming on and not having that capacity that we need? So grid reliability, resilience is very important. Does the North Dakota Public Service Commission have an active role? Yes, we have. Again, I want to say Julie Fedorchak is doing a great job on MISO, serving there, and Randy Chrisman having a voice on SPP.
Trygve, same question to you. How does the PSC address what I think is a concern for a lot of voters, which is the reliability of their lights coming on when they flip the switch?
Well, North Dakota, we export, I want to say it might be even over half of the energy that we produce in the state. So there actually is plenty of energy being produced here right now. In the future, there are going to be big changes to the grid, whether you believe in climate change or not. And I've talked to plenty of people who don't believe in climate change, and we've had to agree to disagree. But that future is coming, and grid reliability will be a major issue as we update that infrastructure. When that happened, that problem that happened in Texas, really none of that has been addressed again. So that could happen once more. But MDU, again, they kind of spanked the Montana Public Utility Commission, or the Public Service Commission in Montana, for saying this past summer or this past spring that we were in danger of rolling blackouts over the summer. And MDU came back and said, that's not true. And we need to be sure that our PSC doesn't engage in that kind of talk, that kind of politicalization of the electric grid and the people of North Dakota, their electric reliability. Personally, I was a Navy nuke power guy. I'd kind of like to see us, I think we're going to be making a move more to natural gas fired plants. There's probably going to be a transition. I would love to see us go with some of the new nuclear technology, but that's just kind of a technical wonky thing on my end.
Trygve, one of the hard things about, frankly, being a Democrat in this part of the country is the perception that Democrats are anti-fossil fuel. And part of that is anti-fossil fuel just for believing climate change is a real thing. How do you balance between the need to transition to more green energy and the fact that there's a lot of really, really great paying jobs in the state of North Dakota that are connected to the fossil fuel industry? How do you balance those two things? And how, and what's your feeling on what the mix needs to look like moving forward?
Okay. Well, I think I kind of described what I would like to see the mix look like. I think I saw Julie Fedorchak on the news the other day with the American Experiment. Does that sound right?
Center for the American Experiment. I think it's a new conservative group that's formed in the state.
So, and they were talking about increasing natural gas production, but they made it sound like, and you hear this thing about like the federal government had somehow put handcuffs on North Dakota on doing that, and I just don't think that's true. I think we've had the resources and we've had the authority to increase natural gas production and make better use of our natural gas. But what we've been missing is the vision and the leadership. And it's been missing in the state legislature. It's been missing across the executive, and it's been missing in the governor's office. We could get that done. And I felt like that was kind of a political statement more than a facts on the ground statement coming from Julie in that case. Kind of lost track of the question there, but I worked in the oil. I worked in the oil fields last year, like I said, and made great money, particularly when, you'd start on a Sunday and by Tuesday you were into your past 40 hours for the week and started to get into that nice overtime pay. And what's happened in a lot of times when we've had these trade agreements is the trade agreements have been great for industry, but they have not looked out for workers. And we got to make sure that as we do this transition, which is going to happen. We used to run coal-fired ships, but that hasn't happened since the 1920s. When I got into the Navy, we were using fuel oil D-type boilers in our ships. Now those are gone. My son was on a amphib ship that used diesel electric, and he was on a destroyer that used gas turbine engines. And now a plug for my son. He's now, Navy's paying for him to go to medical school at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. So he also majored in chemistry at the Naval Academy, and he's doing okay for himself.
Sheri, what is your opinion on balancing between green energy along with fossil fuels? And as part of that question is the climate changing, and do human beings have a role in that?
Well, the PSC has approved wind development of over 3,000 megawatts. And, we approve that. But when we talk, I'm going to reflect this onto grid reliability, is that we're not having enough coming on there with the retirements of the coal. And I just think we need to slow down a little bit and really look at, do we have the right capacity and blend to have that grid reliability? So I'm looking at it from the grid reliability standpoint, as in, if we're retiring, I don't want to see brownouts, blackouts, especially in the wintertime. Then it becomes very much a safety concern for individuals if we're going to experience blackouts. And I just think we need to slow down those retirements and look at what's coming on the grid and what's going off.
Sheri, a lot of what's driving that, I think Chad asked you the question about climate change specifically, because obviously what's driving a lot of that push to renewables is the idea that human activity is having an impact on the climate, and it's changing in ways that are deleterious for our society. So what are your feelings about climate change as someone who holds this office?
Well, we have to look at it. And we look at it, especially when we have, as a regulator, like our neighboring states, what Minnesota has implemented in their rules, and they have to do what affects them. But then we look at someone who's across the border, like Excel, as a company that we regulate. It's in Minnesota and all that. They're trying to meet the regulations of the climate change that Minnesota impacts, but we have to look at us as a state in ourselves. But do we take that into account, the climate change, and looking at wind and other renewables? Absolutely, we do. We take that into account.
Trygve, the job at the PSC is a varied one, and there's a lot of different parts of it. It's a 3-person commission. If you got on there, you would be the only Democrat on the commission. Can you speak a little bit? Because obviously we live in very contentious times, and I think we've touched on this a little bit. But, you know, when you get on there, you're going to be obliged to work with 2 Republicans. Can you speak about that in times, again, that are so divided? There's so much disdain, I think, a lot, which I think is really unfortunate. But how do you do that? How do you go about working? If you were to win, how do you go about working with 2 Republican colleagues on that commission?
You know, that actually, in my experience, that usually works itself out pretty well. Maybe I tend to get along with people, but you know, when I was in the airline, a big part of the airline interview, you're being interviewed by senior pilots at the company, and what they're really looking for, more than technical expertise at that point, is they're looking at, is this someone that I could spend time with in a cockpit? And we've had, you know, in the Marine Corps, I have worked with a Republican or 2, if you can believe it. But same thing in the airlines, same thing in the oil fields, you know, same thing in pretty much everything I have ever done, and it has never been an issue. I think we're all adults. Part of the Democrats' problem right now is that there's actual adults who think we cook babies in our basement or whatever it is some of these far out there people believe. But you know, that's not true. I don't believe Sheri has anyone locked in a basement dungeon or anything like that, and I don't think she believes that about me. And you know, just look forward to being on a good team.
Well, I think we'll maybe stop it there. We're up at our time limit. I asked you guys to come on at 11 until 11 o'clock when we're recording this. So I appreciate you both coming on, and I appreciate you both giving North Dakotans a choice between 2 candidates who are, by my measure, engaged and ready and passionate about this. And thank you really for participating in this conversation.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Good meeting you, Sheri.
Likewise, and thank you guys for the opportunity to come on the show and say why I'm the best candidate for the position.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll wrap things up there. Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.